Yeah. Man, this life insane. Got some money, but I always stay the same. But I never fuck with y'all, you niggas lame. If you making moves, you know it's love with me. Yeah, thought that I would change. See, that negativity is not the way. Seen you niggas try to go and run my place, but it'll never ever lead you to my place. Yeah, thought that I would change. Got some money, but I always stay the same. But I never fuck with y'all, you niggas lame. Yeah. Chasing the billy, if I'm in your city, I gotta get paid for the show. Here for a minute, get litty, sip Henny, then I hop right back on the road. This level is nothing, I can't even focus if it don't do shit for my goals. When niggas was gone, I turned to the mold and got us up out of the hole. Look at them dipping and slide. I got them all alive. You see the smile on my face? The merch is sold out for a while. It ain't a nigga out here in the scene like me that could tell you the truth. Took a few grams, got out the jam, the same man, do what you do. Yeah. Got some money, but I always stay the same. But I never fuck with y'all, you niggas lame. Yeah.
Hey Black Child, what's up? I'm just calling to let you know that I'm happy and I'm proud of what you're doing. You know I'm always going to be your number one fan. As I always say, you can do it. There's no such thing as can't, because you could. But anyway, I'm just letting you know, when you come out, I want you to play my number one song. Shorty. You know I can't sing like you can, but let them people know how you do. Later, love you. Peace out.
Got some money, but I always stay the same. But I never fuck with y'all, you niggas lame. Yeah. Thought that I would change. Thought that I would change.
I was just listening to the music. Lots of naughty words in it.
All right, gang. That's right. We like to get our streams canceled. We make sure that there's songs with curses right up front in the first 30 seconds so YouTube doesn't get any crazy ideas like promoting this stream in the algorithm. We're out here to make sure nobody gets to watch this because we just sabotage it right up front. No, actually, that's my cousin OG Roddy's music, and we like the vibes, man. We're kind of a messy crew around here. Look, so I'm gonna just cue this on up like this, y'all. A lot of y'all know they put me in the middle of the fire. So I saw that Gutsick Gibbon debated Donnie. I really left this alone. I just decided I wasn't even gonna. I haven't even watched this. I don't even know what happens. I was like, I'm staying away from this. But a lot of y'all know I debated. I wouldn't say debated. I ended up in a late night conversation with about 3 or 4 creationists, and Gutsick Gibbon made a video about that, and that was my introduction to her. It was super huge. It helped our channel grow immensely. I'm also hoping that Erika and I can do some stuff with Derek down the road. She's been through the channel actually a time or two. So we love Erika, love Gutsick Gibbon. She's a biological anthropologist. Think she's great. Think she's in grad school. I'm pretty sure she's a PhD student. She always just does phenomenal work. Now, on the flip side of this is Donnie from Standing for Truth. And I know Donnie because he...
In the upside down.
he hosted the debate I had with Kent Hovind. And as I was preparing for that, I noticed that Gutsick Gibbon sort of had a less than favorable opinion of Donnie and believed that there were reasons why certain atheists in the community avoided debating Donnie and avoided debating on Standing for Truth. I really didn't know any of that until it was way too late. But let me cue this up by telling y'all where I'm going with all this. Donnie was actually really, really nice to me. And I know that that's what religious people do. But no, like for those of you that remember preparing for the debate, like Donnie was super cool about everything. He was really flexible about making changes to make the debate more suitable to what I wanted to talk about. He was really cool with the format. Donnie spent quite a bit of time hanging out on our channel, and also would hang out on the Casino, which is our video game channel, right? So I don't have the same vitriol for Donnie that most people have. I judge people on my experience with them. Most of this stuff where I hear people don't like them, it's like creationist evolution debate stuff. So that's kind of hard for me because in a sense, it reminds me of a lot of the people I went to church with, right? A lot of people that I played at church for, they were the nicest people. I considered a bunch of them friends. I would hang out with them. I would go on trips with them. I would have lunch with them, mandates, whatever it was. Like, we were really, really cool. But at the end of the day, they would look me in the face and tell me they were creationists and they didn't believe in evolution and they thought it was nonsense. And so I don't know where to put Donnie on that spectrum. I don't know if he's just nice, like Christian nice, but then is just, all about the Kent Hovind grift, or if he's one of those, genuine super Christians who's like a really nice guy, but unfortunately being a super Christian has him off the reservation in terms of evolution. And I'm sure you guys noticed that's why I don't talk about Donnie's channel a lot on my channel. We don't review a lot of Standing for Truth stuff. Because some of the people I have over there, like for instance Matt Powell, I think are more problematic. But anyway, that's the setup. Cliff, I don't know if you had anything else.
No.
Before we get in here. All right.
I got my prediction. I gave you my prediction before.
I'll give the audience your prediction so they'll believe you.
One of two things. We're going to see one of two things. Either we're going to see just total crack pottery, like just completely misunderstanding, almost willful misunderstanding, or what I'm almost expecting is more likely we're going to see this dodging, this weaving, where it's they're going to bring up super technical details, and they're just going to keep shifting, and then when they get addressed, they're just going to be like, oh, but what about? So it's going to be one of those two. That's my prediction. We'll see.
All right, here we go.
Hello, my gentle and of course very modern apes. So I've had this really nice ongoing streak for about 6 months, a year now, where I've kind of sworn off talking to certain individuals online in a sort of verbal discussion style environment. And I was feeling pretty proud of that streak. I was feeling good about that streak. Anyways, bad news, I relapsed. Anyways, this actually might be a good thing for you guys because I'm going to be really busy in the months of March and April, and I really needed some filler content on the backlog. So this counts as sort of a video that I'm going to put out there for your enjoyment, and you can kind of take it as you will. The conversation is with young earth creationist YouTuber Standing for Truth. You probably know him. I've made videos on him. I've talked about how I won't talk about him or
Also, quickly, Maya provided the correction. Thank you, Maya, that she's a PhD student in primatology. And we should chat about that, right? Because I did my early graduate work in biological anthropology, and there's so much of the same stuff. That's why I thought she was a biological anthropologist. And actually she is, right? Primatology is considered a subdiscipline of biological anthropology, at least as far as I consider it. But I would love to hear her take. And it'd be great for us to do a stream and just compare notes on our grad programs.
to him, and then of course we're here again. I have a problem. So this young earth creationist Standing for Truth, or Donnie as he likes to be called, was talking to evolutionary biologist and friend of the channel Dan Stern Cardinal of Creation Myths, and they were discussing human chromosome 2, and I caught wind of this interaction and went in and listened for a little while, and I noticed some errors in the things that Donnie was saying, so I hopped in at the end of their chat to correct the errors that I had heard, and eventually it turned into a conversation about fossils, so paleoanthropology as well. Now, the human chromosome 2 conversation was interesting. Most young Earth creationists don't accept the fusion of human chromosome 2. Donnie's been back and forth on it because it is true that you can kind of force fit that into a young Earth creationist narrative. But all of that being said, the human chromosome 2 part was not the most fun nor the most interesting to me. No, I enjoyed the fossil conversation. Today I was walking on campus and there was a little carnation that had fallen onto the sidewalk. It was all by itself, and I picked it up and I put it in my pocket because I thought it looked kind of fun and cute, and I still think that, hence why it's still there. Anyway, someone later told me that carnations are sometimes associated with, like, death and funerals, and I think that this is appropriate, and it was actually this joke that made me decide to sit down and record this now. Because I'm dressed for Donnie's funeral, since he got absolutely slaughtered in this discussion by me. Now, the conversation was super cordial and very enjoyable, and it was actually like one of my best, I would say, interactions with Donnie as far as like getting along and keeping things civil, which is great. But like, I think that he got really roasted on this one. I don't think there's a way out of it. I don't think that he managed to argue his way out of it in the conversation itself, but like worse yet, this is like a heat problem style of routing, right? Like there is no way to fix the problem that I presented to him without accepting some things that most young Earth creationists aren't going to want to accept. Okay, so a little bit of necessary background information. Young Earth creationists don't accept human evolution. They just don't. They don't like the association between humans and chimps. They don't like that humans and chimps are more closely related to one another than either is to anything else. And they really don't like the idea that big brains in human evolution and bipedality emerge slowly through geologic time when looking at the hominid fossil record. So as a result, young Earth creationists like Donnie, and he is relevant, this is his opinion here, would take the position that hominins can be kind of itemized into like humans, they're just humans, and like just apes. No, that doesn't make any sense because we obviously have hominins that bridge the gap between the more basal apes of like the Miocene up into our hominins that are bipedal and have big brains, the brains are getting bigger, etc. And Australopiths are a great example of that because they're bipedal, apish-looking critters with apish-like faces.
UC Love coming through with the heat. They don't accept any field of study, not just evolution. It's really bad. All right, I'm gonna let her keep rolling.
And very small brains, and yet they're walking upright. From the waist down, they look very, very much like a modern human. This is a critical point that I don't harp on enough in this conversation, but the pelvis, like from the waist down, and many aspects of the sort of postcranial waist down, is not exactly like a modern human. In fact, it's not exactly like any member of genus Homo. It's its own thing. Like, Australopiths have their own derived characteristics, and in the case of Australopithecus afarensis, who's one of the hominins that we talk about in this conversation, they have some characteristics of their pelvis and of their legs that are unique to them. So they have an iliac flare. This is unique to Australopithecus afarensis. They have, like, really strong attachments, and it looks like they've got, like, strong, heavy perineal musculature, which is interesting, and then they've also got a long femoral neck. Humans don't have any of these characteristics. In fact, members of Homo don't have any of these characteristics. But I digress. Now, young Earth creationists like Donnie would take the stance that Australopiths are in the just apes category. Homo habilis, they would probably put in there as well, but I'm not 100% certain. But pretty much Homo erectus and up, they would say those are just humans. As a result, they assess each individual hominin find, and they say, okay, you know, this belonged to the ape category, and this belonged to the human category. So Donnie takes the stance, for example, that Lucy, Australopithecus afarensis' pelvis, like, belonged to a pygmy human, and Answers in Genesis would take a sort of similar stance that anything that's kind of looking like it's human, even though it belongs to a more basal hominin, just belongs to humans. Like, it is a human characteristic. Yes, this is very blurry and hard to decipher. No, it is not standardized, but this is just so you know. This is basically a methodology that makes it impossible, or very close to impossible. You have to be very lucky with your fossil finds to prove that Australopiths were bipedal to young Earth creationists, because they will just look at something that looks more human than it is like a chimpanzee. For example, every Australopith pelvis ever. And they'll say, well, because it looks more like a human, it belongs to a human. So they just parse everything out. There is no room for anything that's transitional, even if it looks transitional, as in the case of the pelvis of Ardipithecus ramidus. They'll itemize it for, like, out of necessity. This means that any Australopithecus skeleton that is found, even if it's like mostly complete, young Earth creationists like Donnie and like Answers in Genesis, in different ways and sort of with different methods, will look at those remains, and even though there's no genus Homo in the bone bed, in the sort of the site, they'll look at those remains and they'll say, whatever looks more human, even if the skeleton is like a single individual, they say whichever ones look more human, those belong to a human, and whichever one look more apish, those ones belong to an Australopith, which is a part of the ape group. And like, it's just a mixed bone bed. No, it's not one individual. It's been mixed up. Actually, there were humans and Australopiths living in this region, and that's why it looks like we have a transitional fossil, because it's transitional, but it's made up, basically. So there's a simple, again, but difficult to find solution to this. You would need to find skeletons that are preserved in articulation, like they're preserved still intact,
YouTube punk
still
in the house.
The bones that would have articulated
There's a wild
together,
YouTube punk.
still in contact, still touching in the rocks. That is pretty rare. And, you know, even more importantly, you would need to find a skeleton where parts that they would accept are definitely Australopith parts are still in articulation with parts that they would definitely say are human parts. Because how else are you going to argue that, like two individuals came running at top speed and slammed into one another and, like, in quantum tunneling events managed to merge in just such a way to make it look like a single individual was preserved and fossilized with
missing
the bones
feet.
still touching in anatomical position? No, that would be a hard sell. And we have those skeletons. Okay, meet Australopithecus sediba. These hominins were found in 2010 by Lee Berger and colleagues. There's a juvenile, that's MH1, so it's a little kid. It's a male, and then MH2 is the individual on the right. That's an adult female. Now, the incredibly insane part about these hominins, Australopithecus sediba is the species that they belong to, so they're members of Australopithecus. The incredible thing about them is that a lot of their bones were found in direct articulation, full preserved articulation. And Donnie and I talk about which of those bones were actually found in articulation in our chat. Now, the specifics of what Donnie and I get into is the sort of dissenting opinion that two paleoanthropologists have about these hominins. Because of the nature of their preservation, and because of the sort of blocks, the portions that were articulated and the portions that weren't, and because of contemporaneity in hominins all across East and South Africa at this time period, there are two paleoanthropologists, Ella Bin and Yoel Rock, who argue that that these two individuals here are actually four individuals, and that two of them are from genus Australopithecus, and two of them are from genus Homo. Great news, you might be thinking. If you're a young Earth creationist, you might be thinking, oh my gosh, that's great news. But there's a huge issue that is very, very inconvenient and damning to young Earth creationists and to Donnie, sort of hidden in that argument. And to make matters even worse, Donnie has corresponded directly with Ella Bin, and he reads a portion of their email to me that is pretty rough on him and the hypothesis that he has for Australopithecus sediba being a chimeric taxon, as it were. So, full disclosure, there are paleoanthropologists who think that these are a mix of two taxa. The problem is their argument doesn't help young Earth creationists. And I also want it on record, it is not consensus that these represent two taxa. The consensus in paleoanthropology as of right now is that there are two individuals, and yes, they do belong to Australopithecus sediba. So, without further ado, I'm going to play the conversation, and I'm not going to clip in and out like I normally do. I'm just going to let the conversation play as it is, so apologies for the bad audio because I kind of hopped on with my gamer headset. I'm going to let it play out. It's sort of more like a podcast, because I'm not on camera, so, you can listen to it while you're doing other stuff, whatever. And I want to know, was my argument did I articulate myself properly? Did you understand the gravity of the argument and how problematic it is for young Earth creationism? Because I got the impression that Donnie didn't quite
Cliff, if you want to pause in, just let me know.
This should have been appreciated at the end of the conversation, and we are emailing back and forth, so this may change. But that being said, I want to know, did you understand the argument as I was making it? And would you have understood it without this sort of introductory material here? So let's hear it. Let's let it play out. It's long, so put it on while you're doing chores or something like that, or in the background. Let me have the ad money.
She's all
Erika,
mine. You
good
better.
to see you. Good to have you.
Hello, standing. It's been a while.
All right, problems already. We're just gonna go with it. Y'all already know we got history with this Veckel dude. He's just a problem. I think of him. I think he's a black guy who hangs out with that whole kind of racist William Freeman crew. So I kind of remember these big panel discussions. I don't know if this was Donnie's channel or what, but I'm suspicious there may be some other problematic
It's
personalities
been a while,
here.
long time
Also,
no
a lot of
talk, long time no
Christians.
see. Same thing I said with Dan. And so
Yeah,
good to
Veckel's a
have you.
Christian
Good to talk to
too.
you. I hope you've
So
been
she's
well.
doing what I
I
did. She's in
have
the
been, yes.
panel of
I've been stressed
creationists.
out, but I've been well.
So if chimpanzee today have a lot of interaction with humans and other different species, but we understand that the fossil record, there's a lot of overlap. I've even watched it wasn't a lecture. I've watched a lot of Lee Berger lectures, but it was a series he was doing. Specifically, the video was on species.
Oh,
And
yeah?
he pointed out that, right, I think you commented on a video that I did on it. And he talked about how Australopithecus afarensis may in fact be a chimeric species. And he went over different groups that coexisted at the same time. And so it looks like there may have been, if assuming evolution is true, right? There may have been a lot of interaction back then as well with Australopithecus afarensis and other groups at the time, including Homo. And so if it's more or less unlikely today, why would that be any different in the past, let's say 4 million years ago?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't necessarily think that the fact that all humans today have 46 chromosomes is necessarily, like, the fact that that might be up to chance. I don't think that's out of the question. And in the same way that it might be up to chance that there's a population that had a mutation that gave us white sclera, as we're seeing with chimpanzees today, and then that proliferated through. I guess it's a little bit different because that has an adaptive benefit. But hair color, sure, something like that, or the way that our hair curls or doesn't, right? I just don't, like, it's just drift, right? It's just the same stuff that's happening today, but in the past. Now, as far as Australopithecus goes, the chimeric thing, right? Like, there's a disagreement in paleoanthropology as to whether or not Australopithecus is the lumpers versus splitters thing. Ironically, Berger is taking the splitters position. Neanderthal and Homo sapiens.
All right, I fucked that up totally.
Right,
Hang on a sec.
Lecture. I've watched a lot of Lee Berger lecture to root to all of your descendants.
Anthropology as to whether or not Australopithecus is the lumpers versus.
All right, just quickly, I wanted to pull up this whole chimera thing. It's like a mythic, I should say biology. It's based on the mythic. It's important because this is what we talk about when we talk about they want a half monkey, half turtle, part lizard, right? A chimera is an organism or tissue that contains at least 2 different sets of DNA, most often originating from the fusion of as many different zygotes, right? So that's what they mean by chimera. And lumpers versus splitters is basically if you tend to include things in the big group or if you tend to split things out into their lumpers versus splitters are opposing factions in any discipline that has to place individual examples into rigorously defined groups. Lumpers assign types broadly, assuming that differences are not as important as signature similarities, while splitters take precise definitions and create new categories to classify samples that differ in key ways and oftentimes minor variations. So this becomes very important in taxonomy because you got to decide who's in the group, who's not in the group, what derived traits make you a different group, does everybody share all the derived traits? So that's kind of what they're talking about. I know there's some vocabulary there. Thanks, guys.
The splitters thing. Ironically, Berger is taking the splitters position here. I know Lee wants to posit that Homo begins in South Africa, and I would disagree with that. I don't think that there's very much support for Homo's origins being in South Africa, especially with a 2.8 million year old Homo, probably Homo habilis, Homo species, but it's probably Homo habilis. In Lamech, I think it's in Lamech. Yeah, I think it's a difficult case to make. But as far as the chimeric taxa go, right? Like, he's a lumper. He's a splitter. Excuse me. He thinks that Australopithecus afarensis should be several different Australopith species. He thinks that you should call some of them. He would accept, for instance, Australopithecus barrel-ghazali or Australopithecus diarmida or Garhi's pretty well accepted, or Australopithecus prometheus, right? So he's splitting them up, and in that way, it could be a chimeric taxon because you'd be having multiple different Australopithecus species potentially cohabiting certain areas.
But then some species would die out, basically deadlines. You'd have one main branch, as you put it, a root to all of your descendants, your Homo habilis, Homo erectus, Homo sapiens. So would Ella Bean then be also a splitter? Because I know she pointed out with Setiba specifically that they mixed 4 individuals, adult and juvenile Australopith, with an adult and juvenile Homo. And so again, I think it just comes down to, and feel free to respond, I know you love the subject, is we do have overlap, intermingling, intermixing then in the evolutionary scenario, and also today. And basically my point is, yes, genetic drift is a thing. Drift works slowly, especially in larger populations, but it's all going to be dependent on that interaction that you mentioned at first with chimpanzees today, right? With humans and then your other ape species. But it seems like it may have, it was at least similar back then in the evolutionary scenario, may have even been more complicated, which means it would be even more complicated to fix that fusion, I guess, is my point. Speak to that a bit, Erika.
Yeah, I mean, the way that I understand it is that we've got Australopithecus afarensis, which I don't know. I want to be clear. I don't know which hominin this fusion occurred in. I have absolutely no idea. I'm sure there's someone out there who's done some work on it, but I don't tend to focus on the paleogenomics as much. And I don't even know what paleogenomics you would do with this because we don't have an Australopithecus genome. But that being said, like, from what we can tell, first of all, yes, absolutely. There are sympatric hominins living all across Africa. And this is not surprising because we have sympatric apes today. Chimpanzees and gorillas live in the same location in some spots. Orangutans and gibbons live in the same spots. Different kinds of gibbons live in the same spot. The Miocene is absolutely covered with apes living sympatrically. So it's not surprising to me that you have things like Australopithecus and Homo being contemporaneous with one another. The problem for creationists is the fact that they become contemporaneous and then like Homo takes hold and is like dominant as far as from there forward, but Homo is never found with anything earlier, right? So like
we do find Erectus overlapping with all or most, you'd probably contest afarensis, but most of your Australopithecus types. And yet Homo erectus lived on the globe for a million plus years.
Well, Homo erectus, again, like let's call it Homo erectus for argument's sake. I'm fine with that. We can call it Homo erectus. So the oldest Homo erectus, like for sure, like as far as something that is Homo erectus, is going to be 2 million years ago. So Australopithecus anamensis shows up 4.4 million years ago, no Homo. Australopithecus afarensis shows up 3.8 million years ago. 3.8 million years ago, no Homo.
Well,
right?
Wait a minute.
Oh, go ahead.
Are there not paleoanthropologists that are saying Australopithecus afarensis being chimeric with a Homo group and an Australopith group, or are you saying chimeric with multiple?
Go ahead.
So here's my take on this. It's problematic. Let's put it that way. It's problematic. It's problematic, I think, because you've got one person who's actually getting a degree in this. They're actually studying it, and you got somebody else who just wants to punch holes in it. I don't believe that, Donnie is going and reading books about this and studying it to try to understand it. He's just trying to punch holes in it. You can hear from the way he's asking questions. He's not coming at this as like two experts who have different opinions. He's just saying, yeah, but what about? And it's like, dude, yeah, we don't have a time machine. I can't go back there. Somebody says to me, I've gotten into arguments with people about abiogenesis, or even having like a continuous fossil record. And they're like, oh, but you can't prove that fossil was an organism that had any offspring. And I'm like, get me a time machine. You get me a time machine, and then I will invest. I promise, if you get me a time machine, I will invest the rest of my life. I'll get a whole team of people, and we'll go back in time, and we will track organisms. We'll make sure we're there for their births. We'll tag them, and then we'll make sure when they're grown up and they have offspring, we'll tag those offspring. And this is it's going to take a long time. It's going to take a lot of work, but we will actually document over the millions of years, right? It's going to take millions of researchers running around, tracing all these tags to do this, but we'll do it. We'll totally do this because it's worth doing. But without a time machine, we don't know. You can't know anything for certain. And so any theory that anyone comes up with, you can punch holes in. It's just like, what's the point of even having this conversation? Like Like, what we're not saying it must have happened this way. You're never going to catch a scientist who's not either back in a corner or speaking colloquially, saying, I know for a fact that it is exactly this way. Right? That's kind of the thing with science. We always know we could be wrong. And so for somebody to come along and go, oh, but couldn't there be an exception? Couldn't it be that, these fossils that are found in the same place happen to be from two different organisms, happen to be laid out in such a way that it looks like they're from one organism? You're like, sure, it could, but why would you assume that? Why would you ever make that assumption? And so that's kind of where I come from. And so listening to this, it's just annoying. Like, this is just annoying because it's just like, no matter what Erika says, it's going to get turned around and converted into, yeah, but what about this? But what about this? And that's the needling sort of detailed analysis where someone has read probably what somebody else has written, right? I mean, this what's his name with the stupid zinc fingers?
Sal Cordova.
Sal does this. He does exactly that. Oh, but what about the? You got all this stuff. You got retroviruses. You got fusions of chromosomes. You've got all of this stuff. Except I'm going to go to this one thing because I think it tears you apart. And the problem is that's not how this works. If you have a massive theory, and time again, you're showing that it works, and you find one problem with it, and it's not a rabbit in the stomach of a T-Rex, right? It's not that kind of a problem. You got some detail, we don't know how it works. Is the correct assumption to say, oh, throw out everything? Throw out everything because this one thing can't be explained. We got to start from scratch. Or is the correct assumption to say, I think it may be that there's a wrinkle. And I think it's more likely that the vast majority of what we know is right, and that we got to work on this wrinkle. We got to figure out what's going on. Maybe it's bad data. Maybe there's a detail we don't understand. I'm hearing it less now, but there was a lot of people going, "Oh, there's neo-Darwinism. They had to create that because Darwin was wrong." And now people are saying neo-Darwinism is wrong. And you're like, no. Neo-Darwinism never denied
Darwin,
the tenets of Darwin, and the newer theories like this stuff where they're like, oh, you can have epistasis, you can have a Lamarckian style inheritance because you can have long-term epistasis where conditions of the parents will affect their ability to copy the genome effectively, or can create, there are conditions that will make transient states within a genome that can be inherited and can affect the offspring. Yeah, and we understand that, but that doesn't cause all of the 99% of what we understand to be wrong. It's just, there's 1% we didn't understand. Yeah, that thing can happen, but it only explains 1%. So we had it, 99%.
Right.
It's like if you want to go to physics, you could talk about, hey, we had a good model for how gravity works, for how orbits work, and then we get to Mercury, and it's like it doesn't quite line up, and you have to realize, it's a bit more complicated. But that doesn't mean that we were absolutely wrong. But that physics still worked fine if you want to build a house.
Also, is he just like, I really don't know where to put him. I'm trying to decide, is he a Kent Hovind acolyte? Is he aspiring to be the next Kent Hovind? Or is in some regard he's worse because he's had to jump into contemporary biology just to work, just to challenge all of it. It's like he is actually reading these papers and I guess even corresponding with the authors of them. And so this is what it's like to be, if you were to get one of these emails, Cliff, right, it would just be the same thing. It'd just be some creationist, I read your paper where it says you evolved functional intelligence, but is it da-da-da-da-da-da-da, right? And it would be just an email with the intention of picking your work apart.
Right. No,
It's very
look,
problematic.
Here's the thing. I've had these discussions or debates with people where I basically say, okay, let's talk about quantum mechanics for a minute. So quantum mechanics has there's an unanswered question at the core of quantum mechanics, because you get randomness. Now, most people who study quantum mechanics, who I've talked to, they're okay with that. They say you can't know, the better you measure the accuracy of the particle, the less you can know its state. The rest, I mean, if you know the velocity, you can't know where it is. If you know where it is, you can't know the velocity. Okay, fine. And that, you don't actually know where a particle is until you measure it. It could be anywhere. I personally find this very, very hard to accept, because I do not understand a mechanism that can create randomness. I think we live in a deterministic universe. Everything seems to be deterministic. And so there are explanations in quantum mechanics that allow us to maintain determinants. The problem is you have to give up locality. For most people, the idea that objects that are separated by a vast distance can interact instantly, that's impossible. But they're okay with randomness. So I've had debates with people where they're like, look, the Copenhagen interpretation says blah. Now I don't know more about quantum mechanics than Donnie probably knows about evolution. To be honest, I have read some stuff on it, but I haven't even gone into papers. I've read certain stuff about it. So I'm not making a statement. What I'm saying is, until somebody can come along in quantum mechanics and say, no, randomness is really a thing. It's really a thing. This notion of hidden variable, it's not even hidden variables. It's non-locality. If they can show that non-locality is actually not possible, then I'm going to go, okay, fine. I'm one step closer to accepting what you're saying. You still kind of have to explain to me how randomness can happen, or else I'm going to maintain some skepticism. And so it's fine if Donnie just wants to maintain some skepticism, to say, look, I'm not absolutely positively convinced that this is the case, then that's fine. Everyone should maintain some skepticism. But if I talk to a physicist and I said, you're wrong, right? If I went to a physicist and I actually said, you are wrong about about your interpretation of quantum mechanics, not I have some questions. Because the problem is, you can look at Donnie and go, well, maybe that's all he's doing. Maybe all he's doing is trying to say, I think I don't accept what you're saying. Except he's got a religious position that demands that this is wrong.
Right.
So he's not doing a fair investigation. He's not saying, hey, how can you convince me that what you're saying is true? That's what I would do. If I go to someone who accepts the Copenhagen interpretation, I would go right straight out and I would say, look, I have a problem accepting randomness and I don't have a problem accepting non-locality. Convince me. But
Right.
he's not doing that. Erika is convincing. Erika just keeps dropping no, this is the way. This is why, this is why we think it's this way. And it doesn't matter what he says, because Donnie can never accept this, because he's based his religious belief on it, which is also ridiculous, because honestly, if God wants to do it, he can do it any way he wants. If he wants to fiddle with DNA, he could do that. So God is completely unfalsifiable. So why argue with the biologists? If you want to believe that God exists, fine, you believe in a totally unfalsifiable thing. It doesn't matter. Just go for it.
Yeah, I we asked what is the purpose of doing this? So one, it's just, I guess it's always fun to dunk on some creationists if you're up for it. Two, I don't know. I think there's always value from the audience's perspective to hear how actual evolutionary biologists hear this conversation. But Gutsick Gibbon is clearly armed and tooled and maybe even overqualified to be having this conversation with these people. So she's got the goods there. What's interesting, I think, from our perspective, especially what you're speaking to, and this is something I think the audience also struggles with, maybe even more so, is how do you recognize bad faith actors? In this situation, how do you recognize someone who really isn't here to learn? And I think that
I would say,
yeah,
there's two ways they could be a bad faith actor. It could be that they aren't here to learn, but it could be that they're lying, right? It could be that in some way they're lying, or they're actively not listening. But it could also be that they're so brainwashed that they think they're making good arguments, right? And I would say that I don't think that's a bad faith actor. I just think it's a person who, it's much harder to reach that person if they are so convinced of their position that they cannot be moved.
Right. I agree.
Right? Anything that goes against their position, it's like, okay, well, or they just can't understand it. They just can't comprehend it. Then what do you do with them? So it's kind of like, I don't know. It's just a problem. What do you do with them?
Yeah. Some people in the chat are saying that they think Donnie wants to be Kent's replacement, like he wants to take over for his audience when Kent leaves. But here's the thing, Kent already blew that up, right? Kent got his YouTube channel canceled. I think Kent Hovind is gonna send it all crashing down, and there's not gonna be anything there. And it's just a possibility, I guess I'd say. But yeah, Cliff, to speak exactly to what you're saying, I don't know where Donnie's at with this whole thing. The other thing is, I don't know what type of creationist he is. Because he tends to platform the Kent Hovinds of the world who are like, the Bible is true, it's literally God's word, God created in 6 days, right? But Donnie's over here in the weeds with Erika about Australopithecine, right? So there's no young Earth. So is he an old Earth creationist? Is he a theistic evolution? Like what?
Yeah. I think I got two things that I think I would want to do differently here. I would just want to say, look, what is your point in having this discussion? Like what do you win? If, let's say, you could show that what I said is wrong about this one super detailed thing, you think that that's going to dismantle everything else, every other primate transition, every other evolutionary transition? It's like, it's not going to do that. You have so much more work ahead of you. If you dismantle this one thing, if you show that this one set of fossils didn't work, so what? So the question is, why are you on this point? And the thing is, ultimately, you're on this point because you think that this gives your religion a problem. And then from there, I'm like, look, let's not even talk about this. Why do you believe in your religion? Because you don't believe in your religion because the fossils can't demonstrate evolution, right? That's not why you believe in your evolution, in your religion, right? So we're in a way, he's not being a good faith actor because he's not actually arguing the point that that's convincing him. And that's the other reason why I just think it's a giant waste of time, because you're having an argument with someone who cannot be moved on the point you're arguing because they don't care about the point you're arguing. He's not actually interested in the evolution of anything. He doesn't believe it happens.
Yeah, and this is where
let's talk about why you believe in God.
Exactly. Yes.
That's the only conversation I want to have is, why do you think you're convinced, and why should whatever convinces you convince me? That's literally the only. And until we have that conversation, I don't want to talk about the details of evolution.
Yeah, and when when it comes down to it, and they get together and huddle, they're going to explicitly say the strategy needs to be to tear down and poke holes at the other side. In other words, they're going to say, let's make sure we're not making our claims. Let's make sure we're not defending our position. And this is where I think you kind of make the case that. And again, Cliff, I'm talking about money, right? I'm talking about our careers. I'm talking about grants and papers and whatever. I'm not even talking so much about YouTube. But to me, you're making a point that counter apologetics and STEM expertise kind of are going to walk hand in hand in some way, right? Because if Donnie or any of the other people on this panel were here to learn, they wouldn't be here, right? They'd be in a class or somewhere, and it wouldn't be controversial because they'd be reading the books, they'd be reading the paper, they'd be talking to their professors, they'd be like, oh, yep, done, right? But as long as there are, you know, unschooled evolutionary biologists in these spaces, they're just going to jump into the space. And not to say that Erika's doing this aspect any disservice, she's overqualified. She is really, they're going to stick to the corrections, right? I'm here to correct you, I'm here to correct you, I'm here to correct you. And it's going to take somebody, not that Erika couldn't have done it, but, you know, somebody more along the lines to really call them out on the other part. Go ahead.
But this may work. Look, there are some people who are on the fence, and right, if they're in a place where they can hear this stuff, and they're on a fence, and you know, I think you know, the stuff that Aaron Ra does is like that stuff is like is that how you say his name? I'm always worried I would say it wrong, but anyway, the stuff he does convince people, right? He's laying out the whole philosophy, and for some people, they've been given this line so deep that that pulls them out. But in terms of so in terms of Erika doing this in order for other people to see it, to see her take this guy apart, to show that his arguments hold no weight, right? But in terms of actually convincing him, it's a waste of time. It's frustrating. It's frustrating to watch. For me, it's frustrating to watch. There's no point, right? Yeah.
Let me ask you this: what do you think? How do you think this lands for Christians? Do you think there's that chance that if a Christian watched this, they would kind of? Because I think that's the silver lining. Like if I could find out that were real, maybe that's a study to do, Cliff. Maybe there's literally.
I think that there are some. I think there are some who, like I said, I think there are some people who are on the fence or they're questioning, and this kind of a thing can demonstrate. If they watch this, especially if they have some biology training and they listen to this and they go, "Wow, this guy has nothing. He's bringing nothing to the table." He's just going, but what about, huh? But what about? Right? Like that's, you know, then that's a thing. But I think also, you know, you brought up this point, which is like, they just want to tear down the argument. The thing is, I also just want to tear down their argument, except that the argument I want to have with them is does their God exist? What is the reason that they believe in what they believe in? And why should I find it convincing? Because that's the argument, right? I'm not an atheist because I believe in evolution. I'm an atheist because I'm not convinced by God. So this whole thing, if a person, if Donnie wasn't, you know, how many flat earthers, how many creationists, how many, you know, evolution deniers are people who are not religious? Like, what's the cross section there? The massive cross section. When you even look at flat earthers, the vast majority of flat earthers are religious. It is their religious position that gets them to flat Earth. Right. And so you're like, look, this is the problem. We got to just knock that out. We gotta dismantle that, because this is at the periphery, and it's almost like, a good point. Yeah, I think that they can soundbite this. They can find, you know, if they could get somebody pissed off, you know, who they're debating with, or they can soundbite a piece where they say, "Oh yeah, you made a good point," and they're going to soundbite that.
Yeah, no, that's
because do you think that somebody who's not interested in biology, who's religious, is going to listen to a 2-hour debate on a incredibly particular point of hominid evolution? I don't think so.
That's a great point. And Nitty said, to the point of them being in classes, they could go full Stephen Meyer, or that astrophysicist chick Brad had on. Her name was Taylor. And take the classes, do lip service, then misrepresent for Christian money. Yeah, that's what I think a lot of them are doing. I think Donnie is himself, you know, obviously he doesn't go as far as these other people, but I think he's kind of down that drain. Let me play a few more minutes of this and hear what else Cliff thinks. And I think I'm so grateful y'all are here. This was a fun stream. A lot of y'all know I'm moving, so my schedule's kind of clear for the next little while. But Cliff and I also have a bunch of exciting research things going on, and so this just kind of was an opportunity, an opportune time for us to get some fun stuff in here.
To pull Australopith groups.
I'm saying that Australopithecus afarensis, the species, like there's no member of genus Homo that overlaps with like Australopithecus anamensis, Ardipithecus ramidus, anything from like, I mean, the oldest Homo material argued is 2.8 million years ago.
So who does Lee Berger argue the chimeric, if it's a chimeric species, therefore being a mix of two different species, are you saying it's a mix of two Australopithecus species?
Yeah, it would. Yeah, it would have to be, because like I don't know if you know some of these fossils, right? But like the Littlefoot fossil, STW 273, something along those lines. This is a full skeleton, right? Like it's like a full skeleton.
But there are some bones, well, many bones, I would say, attributed to the afarensis collection or species that look very, very erectus-like. And so
to Australopithecus afarensis, which ones?
Well, within afarensis, this is going to bring us into a 3-4 hour discussion. I'd say a lot of afarensis looks very human-like. The pelvis, for example.
Okay. I see what you're saying. Okay, well, that's going to be a problem for you though, because like if you want to take Ella Bin's perspective that Australopithecus sediba is a mix of Homo and sediba, well, she argues that the vertebra, right, that come from MH2, I believe it's MH2. She argues that those vertebra are Homo, right? That's her argument, because she's a vertebrate paleontologist. She argues vertebra, back, focusing on the back and things like that. Okay, but that vertebra is in direct articulation with the pelvis of MH2, and it's a bowl-shaped, sagittally oriented. It looks just like Australopithecus afarensis. So if you want to take Ella Bin's perspective here, Donnie, then you're taking the perspective that those two genera are present at the Malapasite, and that the owner of that vertebra, the Australopith vertebra, also, like, because again, it's in direct articulation, like it's directly touching the pelvis. Well, you're agreeing that that's what the Australopith pelvis looks like.
Well, I'm specifically, and those are good points I'd like to speak to, but.
All right, we're going to wrap with some discussion, but before we do, I want to hear this point again, because this is the thing she wanted us to make sure we're clear on, I think.
Sediba is a mix of Homo and sediba. Well, she argues,
for example.
Okay. I see what you're saying. Okay, well, that's going to be a problem for you though, because like, if you want to take Ella Bin's perspective that Australopithecus sediba is a mix of Homo and sediba, well, she argues that the vertebra, right, that come from MH2, I believe it's MH2. She argues that those vertebra are Homo, right? That's her argument, because she's a vertebrate paleontologist. She argues vertebra, back, focusing on the back and things like that. Okay, but that vertebra is in direct articulation with the pelvis of MH2, and it's a bowl-shaped, sagittally oriented. It looks just like Australopithecus afarensis. So if you want to take Ella Bin's perspective here, Donnie, then you're taking the perspective that those two genera are present at the Malapasite, and that the owner of that vertebra, the Australopith vertebra, also, like, because again, it's in direct articulation, like it's directly touching the pelvis. Well, you're agreeing that that's what the Australopith pelvis looks like.
Well, I'm specifically, and those are good points I'd like to speak to, but specifically with afarensis, I believe it was Carol Ward. You can correct me if I'm wrong.
I've met Carol. Yeah, I've met Carol.
Well, there you go. Then you can definitely correct me if I'm wrong.
I can speak to Carol. I can speak about Carol for sure.
Your good friend Carol. So there we go. What a small world, eh? My good friend too. No, I'm just kidding. Right. So
yeah, it is a small world, honestly.
Yo, it's crazy, man.
But just that point, right? So like, I'm gonna bring up this Italy point, and it's like, well, look, now you got a problem, because if you're saying, the person who you're saying, the expert that you're citing, who says X, also says this other thing, and that completely conflicts what you just said. It said these two things were found together, which means if that thing is like this other thing, then maybe somebody. Maybe they had a freaky burial site, and they freaking, like, they got two people and they killed them, and they chopped them in half right at the base of the spine, and they very carefully filed the pieces so they fit together just right, and then they buried this abomination of two people stuck together. But short of that, I don't think so. I don't think so.
Yeah, it reminds me of Uncle Bobby's example. Sorry, it's Shin and Truth. Links down in the description. But when he talks about how William Lane Craig is always bringing up the Guth-Vilenkum theorem or whatever, right? And he's done this in debates with astrophysicists who have corrected him based on knowledge of and direct communication with Guth or whoever from the Guth-Vilenkum theorem or whatever, right? And years later, he's just doing the same thing, right? They are citing all of these researchers who would literally tell them they're wrong, and apparently have. So to me, I'm just going to go ahead and say that this is where you get into grifter territory, right? You've been corrected. You ignore the correction. You ignore the real explanation. And Nitty and Dave have been bringing up how when they do these debates, especially these Hovind debates, how they lose track of the super chats that are coming in. How it's apparently at least several $100s per hour while they're having these streams going on. And so, yeah, I mean, that's frustrating. It's going to be frustrating for me to think about that later, right? Like how, you get how I just got fed up into the machine and, it's all just a racket for them. And that's so tough because this is what I feel like. It takes forever, and it takes a lot of tape or some kind of personal relationship with the believer to get to know whether or not you think they're sincere or not. And more times than not, it seems like they're not. But even the ones who are tend to then rely on the insincere people. So I didn't know for the longest time if Donnie was a sincere believer who just, was under the influence of a mega grifter. But now it seems like, Donnie's in on the mega grift himself, and that's probably has always been the case. But then he has that appeal to where if you get to know him, he seems like just a regular Christian dude you might know from the gym or go to church with.
Right.
And so he's just putting on that happy face on Sunday. Yeah, go ahead.
That's a whole other level, and I totally acknowledge that could be a thing, but I also don't care. Like I actively don't care because I don't care. I can't care.
Right.
It's like I don't want to, and this is part of this is like I've been sort of I would say in like early COVID days, I would get on YouTube and I would argue with people because they said somebody on the internet said something wrong, and I'm like, you know what? I don't care. I don't care anymore. I know you're wrong. I'm on year 7 of my PhD. I'm gonna be done next year. I'm only sticking around because I want to do more
work. Yeah.
I want to do a thing that I don't know if I'll get it done if I leave before I get it done. I studied the hell out of this. I know how the damn thing works. And I know from my point of view that part of the thing is like when I listen to this hominid stuff, I haven't read about it. I don't know it.
Right.
But I know I've had discussions with people who don't understand what I do. And you know what it sounds like? It sounds like this conversation that Erika's having with this guy. Because he is talking in the same BS that I hear, and I'm throwing back, the counter arguments. You remember that guy I talked to a few months, whatever that was, a month ago, whenever it was.
Yeah.
He just kept bringing up stuff, and I'm like, no, that's not the way it is.
What was the name of his channel? Wasn't it something very close to Donnie's?
It was whatever.
Standing for Reason or some shit like that.
Whatever it was. But it was just like, it was just, and like that thing went on forever because at one point he's like, well, could I take what you just said as your closing statement and summarize it like this? And I'm like, no, you can't. Like we could have been done, but now that you said that, we can't be done. It's like, just no. You literally, you mischaracterize everything. You misstate everything. And it's the same thing. This is what Erika's dealing with. It's like, and the problem is, I don't know I don't know the literature. I haven't dug up the bones. I don't know these things. And so I can't vet what Erika's saying, but I have to trust it because Erika's going through the same process I am, just with a different emphasis.
Right.
And so what am I going to do? I'm going to trust the guy who's believes in a thing. You know, I everyone has a different way of saying this, but the way I say it is a person who could believe in something, any one thing, a person who could believe in any one thing without evidence can believe in anything at all without evidence.
Right. Absolutely.
And so as soon as somebody tells me they believe in God, I'm like, you want to argue with me about what we actually have evidence for? I know you can believe stuff without any evidence. Why should I believe? Why should I even consider what you have to say about stuff where we do have evidence?
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I think these are incredibly good points. And I'm with you, Cliff, in the sense that I sometimes think dealing with these things at all are a waste of time. The things that bring me back, one, I'm part of the whole YouTube atheist counter apologetics community, right? And so there's certain shit we get into, and it's just like, oh, I'm just a content creator. These are the shit we do, right? But it just is what it is. But then also, of course, there's the aspect of these are people actively working against our field, right? So there's a little bit of interest as evolution educators of like, hey, you guys are kind of undermining our work, and you know, we'd like to address that. And the other thing is, there is a for the benefit of the community to these things. In other words, even in my conversations with Mike,
absolutely, I'm saying from my point of view, I find these things frustrating because I know what's going on, right? You're not actually having a conversation. Like, I've had conversations about my work with people who are actually curious or actually have a different opinion.
Right.
And that's great. This is not what this is. This is whack-a-mole. It's like, you know, it's just like whatever you do, they're going to pop their head up somewhere else.
Yeah.
And I know that was a Ken Ovid thing, you know, and in a way though, like if we were going to do this, I'd rather do it on the I'd rather do it on the God question. I'd rather take it to their house. Say, look, you have the thing for which you don't have. I had an argument.
You know what?
And they basically said, you're on the same footing as I am, right? You don't know things for certain. I don't know things for certain. I said, no, we're not in remotely the same thing, right? I have hard evidence. Actually, he said, you have no hard evidence. I said, I have hard evidence. I have data. I have fossils. I have hard evidence. What you have soft evidence. You have a book. You have opinions. That's soft evidence. And it's like, you can't even compare. Like, if you want to get to the philosophy of how we know things, you can't even compare. But you know, so no, I think that it's useful. I think that there are people who are on the fence, and they are interested in a discussion, an argument like this could be helpful to them.
Yeah.
But in terms of like, I find it infuriating at this point to listen to.
Oh, 100%. That I totally agree with. And also, I'm just going to say, some of us, not myself, but some people in our community have been using TikTok rather effectively to get and engage with Christians on the topic of why they believe what they believe, or do they have evidence for their beliefs or whatever. And I think I should do more trying to find that out, seek that out myself, because I also would enjoy that conversation more than having to listen to these, grad level biology discussions with people who refuse to just understand and accept the science. It's incredibly unproductive in that regard.
The level of detail of question that I would love to actually see this. So there's a level of the detail of the questions and the conversation that Donnie is engaging in, right? What I would love to see is the flip of this, where Erika says, okay, you've asked me a bunch of questions. I've answered your questions. I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions of equal technical difficulty that aren't directly related to this thing, but are critical to the understanding of the field. And I would bet $10 right now that he wouldn't be able to answer any of it. That he doesn't know. He's not read on the field. He's read on the things that he can say
Right.
to give problems to Erika.
And
And that's the problem, right? It's like, what is he bringing to the table here? Nothing. Zero. So,
Yeah. Appreciate your time, Cliff. I think on this issue, it's time for us to find a way to have a more honest conversation about the fact that we're not having an honest conversation. And that's something for us to try to wrap our heads around in the future. Same time next week, my friend?
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Cliff. Really appreciate you.
We got to talk about, we got to pick some directions.
Yeah, we'll talk about, that's a perfect topic. And actually what I think we can do next week is just lay out both directions for people. But I think I like the idea of the paper you proposed, because it's simple and also we get it done.
I'm gonna be busy next week, but we'll play it by ear.
Oh yeah, just let me know.
All right,
later on. Thanks so much, Cliff. See you later. All right, gang, that's going to do it for us, and we'll catch up with you next time. We'll be in Gather. Come hang out. I'm moving. Things are crazy right now, so I'm not exactly sure what the streaming schedule looks like, but we'll see you next time. Set 'em go.
Ready for takeoff?
Whoa. Yeah. Man, this life insane. Got some money, but I always stay the same. But I never fuck with y'all, you niggas lame. If you making moves, you know it's love with me. Yeah, thought that I would change. See, that negativity is not the way. Seen you niggas try to go